Snow drifted across the empty plains like wandering ghosts as Clara tightened the wool blanket around her newborn daughter, whispering faint hopes into the wind as she stumbled down the lonely dirt road. It had been only 3 months since she buried her husband beneath the willow tree behind their broken cabin, the same place where they once dreamed of raising a family. She had no direction now, no home except the memories that tore at her heart, and no family left except the crying infant clutched to her chest. Hunger and cold gnawed at her bones as the storm rolled toward her, splitting the sky with bruised blue clouds that promised a long night of suffering. She walked because she had no choice. She walked because stopping meant surrendering to a world that had already taken too much from her. The baby stirred, whimpering, and Clara kissed her forehead, whispering, "We'll find a way. My little star, I won't let this world swallow us." But as the snow thickened and the day dimmed, the faint strength that carried her began to crumble beneath exhaustion. She stopped at the fork in the dirt road, unsure of which direction led to safety or which path led to another loss she could not bear. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered into the wind, "I'm lost. I don't know what to do anymore." Suddenly the sound of hooves cut through the storm, steady and strong, like the heartbeat of hope itself. Clara spun around and saw a lone cowboy riding toward her, his coat dusted in snow, his face shadowed beneath a weathered hat. His horse snorted steam into the frigid air as he slowed to a stop in front of her. The man's eyes were sharp yet kind, holding a warmth she hadn't seen in months. He took in her trembling arms, the baby pressed to her chest, and the tracks that showed she had walked far more than anyone should in such conditions. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you shouldn't be out here alone." Clara opened her mouth, but only a broken whisper escaped. "I'm lost." The cowboy leaned closer, studying her with a depth that made her feel seen, truly seen for the first time since tragedy hollowed her world. She could tell by his clothing, by the fine leather saddle and the stallion beneath him, that he was no ordinary traveler. She had heard rumors about a reclusive millionaire rancher who lived beyond the northern ridge, a man who rarely came down to town and kept to himself. She had never believed those stories until now. "Storm's getting worse," he said, voice steady. "And you're freezing." Clara shook her head weakly. "I have nowhere to go, sir." For a moment he said nothing, only watched her with the kind of quiet that carried understanding. Then he extended his gloved hand and spoke words that struck her heart like a soft miracle. "If you're lost, then follow me home." Clara stared at him, stunned. She wasn't used to kindness anymore. She wasn't used to any hand reaching out in the darkness. "I don't want to burden anyone," she whispered. The cowboy's voice softened. "A burden doesn't cry in the cold holding a baby. A burden doesn't keep walking when life tries to break her. That's strength. And I admire strength." His sincerity unraveled something inside her, loosening the knot of fear that had tightened since the moment she became a widow. The wind howled, shaking her resolve one last time before she finally reached up and placed her trembling hand in his. With surprising gentleness, he lifted her onto his horse, settling her securely in front of him so she could cradle her baby without worry. Then he wrapped his coat around her shoulders to shield her from the storm. She felt warmth for the first time in days. As the horse turned north, snowflakes glimmered against the fading sun, and Clara allowed herself to look forward instead of back. She didn't know this man's name, didn't know why he had chosen to help her, but something in his presence felt safe, like the world had not completely forgotten her. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the strong, steady heartbeat beneath his coat, and for the first time since her husband died, she felt the faint stirrings of hope. Maybe this road didn't end in darkness after all. Maybe, just maybe, the stranger who found her at the crossroads was the beginning of something she never thought she'd have again, a future. The northern ridge rose like a fortress of stone and snow, but as the cowboy guided his stallion through the narrow pass, Clara saw lights flickering in the distance, warm, golden lights that seemed out of place in such a harsh land. As they approached, a sprawling ranch emerged through the storm, grand and well-kept, with wooden fences stretching across acres of open fields and barns the size of small houses. Clara's breath caught as she realized she was entering a place built by someone whose life was shaped by hard labor, deep responsibility, and old money earned through sweat rather than privilege. The cowboy dismounted with practiced ease and lifted Clara down with careful strength, making sure her baby stayed bundled in warmth. "This way," he said softly, leading her toward the large porch. The moment the front door opened, Clara felt heat from a roaring fireplace engulf her, melting the ache in her frozen fingers. A housekeeper hurried over, shocked to see Clara's condition, and immediately took the baby to wrap her in soft blankets. Clara hesitated, but the cowboy touched her shoulder reassuringly. "You're safe here," he said. As she thawed before the fire, he finally introduced himself. "Name's Weston Hayes," he said, removing his hat. "This ranch has been in my family for 4 generations. I run it alone now." Clara studied him, his rugged jaw, his steady eyes, the quiet endurance etched into his features. He looked like a man who carried more burdens than he ever talked about. Weston sat across from her and asked gently, "What happened to you out there?" Clara inhaled shakily and began to tell him everything: the sickness that took her husband, the death that devoured their home, the cold nights spent praying for a miracle while trying to feed a newborn and bury her grief. At the same time, she expected him to judge her for her weakness or pity her with empty words. But Weston simply listened, his expression shifting with quiet anger when she described the landlord who threw her out with a newborn in winter. When she finished, tears slipping down her cheeks, Weston leaned forward. "Clara," he said, "you've been fighting alone for too long." She looked down, ashamed of her struggle, until he added, "You're stronger than you think. Stronger than most people. I know." His words warmed the parts of her heart she thought were frozen forever. Weston stood and walked to the mantel, where an old photograph sat, a woman with gentle eyes and a contagious smile. "My mama," he said softly. "Passed a few years back. She always told me that strength recognizes strength. She'd have liked you." Clara wasn't sure how to respond to such unexpected kindness, but Weston wasn't done. "Stay here," he said, "at least until spring. I've got more rooms than I can count. And a baby shouldn't face the winter outside." Clara shook her head. "I could never repay—" "Something like that." Weston met her gaze with unwavering sincerity. "I'm not asking for payment. I'm offering a place to rest." Something inside her broke in the gentlest way, and without realizing, Clara let out a quiet sob, not of sorrow, but relief. The next days unfolded like a dream she didn't believe she deserved. Weston showed her around the ranch, teaching her the rhythm of the land, the early morning feedings, the quiet songs of the horses, the way the sun painted gold across the fields at sunrise. Clara found joy in small things again, in her baby's soft laughter, in the warmth of fresh bread, in the quiet comfort of Weston's presence. She saw the way he cared for his animals, the way he fixed fences with patient determination, the way his eyes softened whenever the baby reached for him. One evening, as they stood watching the sunset bleed into the horizon, Weston finally said the words that had lingered between them since the moment they met. "When I found you on that road, I felt like something in me woke up," he admitted, "like I'd been living alone even when I didn't have to." Clara's breath trembled as she whispered, "I thought my story ended the day I lost everything." Weston stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "Maybe it was just the beginning. Maybe you were meant to find your way here." She looked up at him, the last light of day reflecting in his eyes, and for the first time she didn't feel lost. She felt found, held, home. Weston reached out gently, touching her cheek. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. "Not as long as you choose to stay." Clara placed her hand over his, her heart finally steady. "Then I choose to stay." In that moment, with snow falling gently around them and the baby asleep inside the warm ranch house, Clara realized the truth behind the words that first saved her. She had been lost. Yes, but sometimes being lost is the only way to be, found by the person meant to change everything.